I'm going to start with Christopher Cordeiro. Christopher, it comes to us from Johannesburg, South Africa, and he's an integral part of the Pestalozzi Trust, which is South Africa's homeschool legal defense organization. And he is also he also has founded an organization called Learn Free. So we'll look forward to hearing about that. Christopher, take it away, please.
So to answer this question about how can advocacy organizations influence the development of favorable public policy, and I think we've set the scene here, but we've raised this issue really, is that in certain countries, we don't have necessarily as developed a home education environment or movement, or perhaps it's not as well known in the public space as it is in America and Canada. And so that can often present different challenges to people across the globe. And I suppose one of the things is the success of home education in Canada and the US. Nothing sells like success. So perhaps a lot of our organizations model themselves over on those models. And I think perhaps one of the things that will be very interesting to hear from the panel is how do you adapt those models in your country, and are they appropriate? So how did I become involved, or how I became involved with home education advocacy was rather a shock because our family had been home educating for some time, and one bright morning we found out that our government was going to institute a completely new bill, and quite a draconian one and quite an invasive one. And I don't know if Mike is listening in, but Mike will appreciate this. It was like sort of we woke up one morning and the Soviets had crossed the inter-German border, and the issue was, what were we going to do now?
I'm listening. You got my attention.
Yeah. And so to stretch the military analogy, it was literally, try and deploy the rapid deployment force from the US, get the first armored division onto the ships. But essentially what we were doing was we had to, the first thing that we had to learn was that we had to slow this advance. Because the policy was this particular law was very advanced, and essentially in its legal process, and essentially we had 30 days to comment. And so that's literally how we began with that was, and how my involvement began is, how do we do this? And luckily I have a fairly diverse background. But I think I'll do the last military analogy a little bit, call it almost like in business a special forces background. So was able to draw in from a lot of experience in legislation, communication, marketing, strategy, to try and look at how we craft a response. And the huge advantage of home education in this and the home educators are highly proactive and active base, and then our first step was to get home educators to just flood in comments on this bill, and that then the volume of comments, even home educators in South Africa constitute less than 1% of the population, much less than 1% of the learner population, but we ended up generating 20% of the comments on the bill. And we did that by being quite innovative. So that's maybe a key thing, is when you've got limited resources, you have to rely on innovation. And we created kind of templates that allowed people to make comment. That slowed that then meant that the department had to start reading. And there was an important thing as well now to know what are the laws in your particular jurisdiction, because in our case, each and every submission has to be read. But if you send in a petition, that petition will be viewed essentially as one submission. But if you send in something that's kind of that raises some key or core points, but is personalized, and that has to be treated as a submission. And so that meant that these over 1,000 submissions by home educators had to be read, and some of these submissions were 100 pages. And that then actually created the time for us to start doing all the things that we had to do in order to kind of begin to change the environment to allow us to challenge that bill. And so what are the key things what are the key lessons that you can learn from that scenario? Because I think, and what we've learned over the last few years again, is the power of research, having research on home education that you can then quote and bring to the attention of policymakers and the media, having legal research as well. So drawing quite a strong distinction between legal research and educational research on home education. Be able to make the legal human rights, fundamental rights arguments. Also, so if you want to avoid the shock of waking up on a morning and finding that the Serbians have crossed the inter-German border, you've got to start early. So you want to be proactive and be on the offensive on every issue, essentially. And you can only really do that if you've got very good intelligence, which means building up relationships with people in government, so that you know that when something's, when the policy is just being debated in the inner chambers or the inner sanctums, you want to be able to know that that's happening so that you can begin crafting your response. Never leaving the table. In certain jurisdictions, I mean, in some places, in some jurisdictions, you've got very strong engagement processes. We have in South Africa on paper, but often in practice, people can effectively be ejected from the process. So you've got to stay in the process. And then it's a question of unrelenting pressure. This battle that we've been engaged in, if you want to call it that, but the struggle to actually get good legislation has now been ongoing for nearly 5 years. And it's literally a thing of, if not weekly, monthly, you have to be doing something about it in order to challenge it in each step that it goes through the process. I think overall, that's a very specific example. Overall, one of the things that I would say, Peter, you must probably, you know this better from your political background, but politics changes very quickly. So one thing that I would have done differently is had broader and deeper relationships in every political party. Because if you rely on strong relations with one or two people, they can be moved into different positions, they could lose their seats, etc. And then you have to start building your relationships from scratch. In summary, the key issues are you need to assess your own regulatory universe, know your laws and culture, be open-minded, learn from other countries, but create something that's in your own, and to then read the broader environment.